From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefanía Bravo, and this is From the South. United States President Donald Trump has been one of the first to take the stand at the UN General Assembly. His speech focused on his administration's isolationist policies, condemning other nations for, quote, taking advantage of the United States. He also spoke about his administration working with some Latin American nations to fight uncontrolled migration in the region.
The United States is also working with partners in Latin America to confront threats to sovereignty from uncontrolled migration. Tolerance for human struggling and human smuggling and trafficking is not humane. It's a horrible thing that's going on at levels that nobody has ever seen before. It's very, very cruel. Illegal immigration funds criminal networks, ruthless gangs, and the flow of deadly drugs. Illegal immigration exploits vulnerable populations, hurts hardworking citizens, and has produced a vicious cycle of crime, violence, and poverty.
President Trump also announced his administration has imposed new sanctions on Venezuela.
Today we are announcing additional sanctions against the repressive regime, targeting Maduro's inner circle and close advisors. We are grateful for all of the work the United Nations does around the world to help people build better lives.
Meanwhile, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has warned that a number of countries will try to raise the issue of his nation to distract from their own problems.
Get ready to see how the United States, Colombia, and countries of the Lima cartel are going to use the topic of Venezuela here for everything, to hide the corruption scandals, the increase in narcotics production, their failures in the peace process, and their falling popularity at home. They'll use migration in Venezuela to try hide it all.
In his speech, Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno addressed Cuba's blockade. He also said dialogue is key to engage in multilateralism.
I don't understand how a country such as this can blockade an almost defenseless nation such as Cuba. It is almost impossible for us to understand that that you prevent others from having the right to their rights, to life, to freedom, and to the pursuit of happiness, that you prevent them. We cannot forget that this should be the venue where we discuss major problems, large problems and small, among countries. And as part of this discussion, we should encourage countries to engage in constant dialogue, standing reciprocity, encourage them to strengthen multilateralism, to listen to each other, to engage in dialogue.
Our correspondent in New York, Karina Cartagena, brings us more details.
Today starts the General Assembly of the United Nations. The Ecuadorian Maria Fernanda Espinosa, current president of the GA, asked to the international community to work for peace and security around the world. As a surprise for the international community, the President of the United States arrived late to the General Assembly and couldn't participate as a second speaker. After arriving, Trump pointed out that the U.S. is much better after he assumed the presidency, and he confirmed that his government will maintain sanctions against Pyongyang. In the next hours will participate many presidents from Middle East and Latin America.
We thank Karina for that report, and in an exclusive interview with Telesur, the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Maria Fernanda Espinosa, said the UN is there to promote dialogue between countries. She referred to Latin America and the situation in Venezuela as well.
The most important thing for me is to understand that the UN General Assembly is a place for dialogue, agreements, and consensus. It is the place for different parts to get together and decrease the suffering of people in conflicts. The UN General Assembly is the great parliament of humanity. It is the place where public policies are debated for all countries. In Venezuela's case, the UN has been operating in the country. As representative of the Latin American region, I will also keep an eye, especially on the region.
She has also talked about ways of finding common points of view with President Donald Trump within the frame of multilateralism.
I will have a meeting with President Trump. I think it is very important that all UN members, all 193 countries, share common points of views, agendas, and concerns. I believe interconnection in the world is a reality. Something happening in one part of the world affects in another location. In this sense, the only way to solve global problems is multilateralism. I'm confident we will find similar point of views with President Trump. United States is the host of the Assembly, and I think it is important we all are committed to multilateralism, sustainable development, and that we all accomplish the three principles of human rights: development and peace and security. Those three are interconnected. We cannot build a peaceful world if we don't accomplish them.
Now to Venezuela, where President Nicolás Maduro congratulated his ministers on the progress made last month on the economic recovery program. He also praised both the security services and the citizens for their role in uncovering the plans behind the failed assassination attempt carried in early August. 3 people involved were arrested over the weekend. Maduro confirmed the perpetrators are associated with the country's far right.
Violent groups have been active since 2014, working on various coup attempts. We caught these terrorists red-handed under an investigation that started right after the assassination attempt against me. They have all confessed that they were working for members of the Venezuelan far right.
Gas stations in the country now work with a new payment method. This is part of the economic recovery plan boosted by the government.
Gas stations in Caracas now work with a new payment method. The system came into effect in September in the border regions to fight fuel smuggling. The measure is also aimed at modernizing gas stations.
Hay 3 modalidades. Para la persona que no tiene carnet de la patria, supuesto, si no tiene carnet de la patria no tiene subsidio. Y el que tiene subsidio, por supuesto, se lo cobran al monedero de la patria. Y esta vez vamos a hacer el periodo de prueba.
Social movements help implementing the payment system. Citizens that don't have the subsidy state card will have to pay fuel at international prices.
The people getting the homeland card does not mean that they are Maduristas or Chavistas, but that is a tool that the government is giving us to end with this problem on the extraction of fuel, and I agree with the president.
The economic sanctions against Venezuela and fuel smuggling worry the most.
We have this irregular situation. We have to overcome it somehow. This is affecting our economy.
The users are learning little by little how to use the new digital payment system.
I think this new change is positive. Let's hope that it doesn't get messy when it's implemented all around the country.
This new payment method is part of the economic recovery plan boosted by the government.
The president of the Argentina Central Bank, Luis Caputo, has resigned only a few months after being appointed. The government has confirmed he will be replaced by Guido Sandleris, current deputy minister of finance. Meanwhile, President Mauricio Macri has been negotiating additional new loans with the International Monetary Fund. Workers' unions and social movements in the country are on strike to protest against austerity measures. Their demands are clear: stop austerity measures and save our jobs.
Worker unions are striking for 36 hours to protest the austerity measures proposed by the government of Mauricio Macri. They have strongly condemned mass redundancies in various public sectors. They want the government to provide better salaries.
Our salaries are not enough. They are worth half of what they were worth 2 months ago. It's outrageous.
People are just finding a way to reach the end of the month. Layoffs haven't stopped. Our protests are repressed. We are living in a country we thought we left in the past.
Workers regret that the problem is getting worse day by day.
Since the economic crisis started, there are 2 million people under the poverty line.
This strike and every protest will either aim at fighting the neoliberal project of the government.
This shows the tenacity of Argentinians. We will not give in to the austerity measures Macri is promoting along with the International Monetary Fund.
Workers and social movements also reject inflation, so public sector workers are making a stand by striking.
The strike is aimed at rejecting austerity measures, but also to visibilize the pain of every citizen that lost his job or can't afford basic goods.
Trains, buses, subways, and flights remain closed. Airlines announced that nearly 80,000 passengers canceled or rescheduled their flights. Banks and schools have also closed.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur. An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Colombian politicians have announced they will meet to solve the problems with the hydroelectric project Hidro Ituango.
Politicians from the Bancada for Peace coalition said in a press conference they will be debating on Wednesday and hope to reach a solution over the Hidro Ituango project, which has been mired in corruption allegations.
Who are protecting the directors of public companies of Medellin? The public prosecutor said there were irregularities with the contracts. We are going to prove who is the consortium, where it comes from, and why it participates.
David Racero from Decent Coalition said that during an inspection at the site, they uncovered serious malpractices pointing to human errors.
Hidro Ituango crisis was not caused due to natural agents, as public companies of Medellin and the mayor want us to believe. The crisis was produced by human decisions.
5 months after the first incident, social organizations claim there are 120,000 people indirectly affected and 25,000 directly affected. Armed groups and the silence of the state have been complicit in the problem.
Human rights organizations reported 102 massacres with 623 victims. The state has this information and it hasn't done anything to compensate the victims. Also, only 1% of people out of 12 municipalities participate in the vote for the project to be approved.
On Wednesday, the first political debate will detail the alleged corruption in Hidro Ituango project. Directors of public companies of Medellin, the mayor Federico Gutierrez, and some public workers are expected to participate.
At least 5 people have died and 9 are missing in Mexico after a river and a dam overflowed due to heavy raining. Heavy rainfall caused flash floods at the Paracico Dam and the Cuito River in western Mexico. Military troops and coordinating rescue and relief efforts, including cleaning up debris and mud from houses affected. The electoral campaign of Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad continues. Haddad toured the southwest of Brazil, visiting former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva again on Monday. After campaigning activities in northeastern Brazil, the PT candidate made a visit to the former president in Curitiba to reiterate his support and solidarity. After meeting with him, Haddad said that his main objective is to work for the restructuring of democracy in the country. Haddad is expected to wrap up his day attending an event in defense of education, science, and technology. For more on the campaign, we go to our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemos.
According to Evope, the conservative candidate is still in the first stage with 28% of the vote intention. For Fernando Haddad, he has gone up 3 percentage points, now with 22%. Next is the center-left candidate with 11%. The trend is for Haddad to continue to rise in the polls. In the coming days, there will be protests by feminist groups against the Bolsonaro for his sexist and fascist behaviors.
We thank Nacho Lemos for that report. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera announced a plan to end the conflict between the state and the indigenous people of the Araucanía region. The plan includes investment worth $1.6 million in the region. But the Mapuche people are demanding political participation and compensation for victims of state violence. They also consider the new plan an excuse for the militarization of their forests.
The fact of being indigenous people is something that fills us with pride. They enrich the culture and life of our country. For this reason, this constitutional reform seeks to protect the values and tradition of our people. Also to recognize the contribution of our indigenous people made with the culture, language and customs. And it also obliged the state to preserve and promote that cultural diversity.
Members of the Mapuche community are expressing their concern about multiple acts of police brutality and discrimination they are being forced to endure.
I think that before proposing the peace accord here in the locality, Sebastián Piñera should start by apologizing to all the Mapuche children because of the discrimination and repression they have suffered at the hands of the state.
Political turmoil in Honduras continues to grow over the presidential elections. According to the opposition, President Juan Orlando Hernández is trying his very best to remain in power, but his re-election is prohibited. Let's take a look at this report.
President Juan Orlando Hernández was able to run for a second presidential term due to a reform of the criminal code that decriminalizes re-election, while the constitution prohibits it.
The problem is that it has been done in an irregular way. At this time, there is no constitution of the republic that is applied in the country. They are pure political agreements that participate in the regulation process of the re-election. In other words, it is legalizing the illegal. Therefore, it's not technically illegal to promote an action of this nature.
Although Hernández had the permission of the Supreme Court of Justice to register in the 2017 elections, the regulation to apply for a second presidential term was suspended. So now the ruling party wants to implement the reform to the National Congress.
The regulation doesn't apply. The Congress doesn't regulate laws. These procedures are made by the executive only. What the Congress can do is regulate.
The opposition, led by Manuel Zelaya Rosales, thinks the way forward is through a referendum to call a national constituent assembly.
We have a failed state. There is no legal security. We have a Supreme Court of Justice that doesn't obey what people say. We still believe that a National Constituent Assembly is an alternative to heal this failed state.
While the ruling party presses for re-election, Hernández insists that this will be his last term, even though he said the same thing during his first term.
It needs to be only one term, consecutive or alternating, but one term. The National Congress will have to decide.
The political system caused the crisis in the 2017 elections is still valid. A year has passed since the opposition demanded electoral reforms that haven't materialized. Without a real electoral reform that is legally binding, Hernández would be free to run for a third presidential term.
The funeral for Botham Jean took place in his native St. Lucia on Monday. Jean's body was flown home over the weekend for the funeral. He was laid to rest at Chalk Cemetery. Botham was killed earlier this month in his Dallas home by a police officer. Calls for justice resonated at the funeral service. As the funeral was taking place, the Dallas Police Department said it had fired Amber Geiger, the police officer who shot Botham Jean. In a statement, it said that Geiger was dismissed after an internal investigation found the officer engaged in adverse conduct when she was charged with manslaughter. The firing comes after widespread calls for action against Geiger, who had been on administrative leave since the shooting. Meanwhile, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States is standing firmly in solidarity with the family of Botham Jean. In a statement, ACS Chairman St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves calls upon the U.S. to ensure justice. Gonsalves also tells the U.S. that our small size ranking in global affairs should not lead to false assumptions about the strength of our resolve and determination in the fight for justice. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
In a world infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deep into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Police in the South African city of Cape Town have used tear gas and stun grenades to disperse protesters. People were demonstrating against crime and unemployment in the poor parts of the city. In a statement, the organizers said very little has changed for working class communities since the fall of apartheid. More than 1,000 protesters have been arrested in Ethiopia in connection with violent protests that took place 2 weeks ago. At a press conference in the capital Addis Ababa, authorities said those arrested were taken to Lay military camp to undergo what they call rehabilitation education. At least 28 people died in clashes near the capital following the return of exiled leaders of former rebel group Oromo Liberation Front 10 days ago. Tanzania Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa has visited the site where a ferry capsized, killing more than 200 people. Majaliwa later visited the Ukalo hospital where victims of the disaster were taken. Residents expressed happiness at the Prime Minister's decision to deploy a bigger ferry on Lake Victoria.
When the Prime Minister said the government is planning to bring another ferry with big capacity to carry almost 50 tons, we are at peace and happy, since the new ferry will be able to carry more passengers and have more routes from Ukala to Ugola.
Typhoon Trami is posing potential danger to Taiwan and Japan. The latest tropical cyclone in the West Pacific rapidly strengthened over the weekend, becoming Super Typhoon Trami on Monday. It is currently equal to a Category 4 hurricane and it continues to intensify. Trami could start producing winds equal to a Category 5 hurricane by Tuesday. The Labour Party's Brexit spokesman in the UK has confirmed they will vote against any Brexit deal reached by Prime Minister Theresa May. He also said that all options must be open, including the possibility of another referendum to remain in the European Union. With about 6 months left until Britain leaves the EU, Prime Minister May is yet to reach a mutually beneficial deal. Her proposals have been rejected by European leaders and members of her own party.
Weeks out from the deadline. The government has no credible plan for Brexit, weeks out from the deadline. No credible solution for Northern Ireland, weeks out from the deadline. And it's blindingly obvious that there's no majority for Chequers. So let me be absolutely clear. If the Prime Minister returns with a deal that does not meet our tests, and that looks increasingly likely, we will vote against her deal.
China has said trade talks with the United States are impossible while U.S. tariffs are imposed. Officials said China is willing to negotiate, but President Trump's latest tariffs iced any efforts. The trade war has escalated throughout the summer, each nation imposing newer tariffs. The U.S. recently imposed tariffs of $200 billion in goods like computer parts and office equipment. Former television icon Bill Cosby has arrived at court to face his sentencing in his sexual assault trial. Cosby can possibly get 10 years of prison for drugging and molesting former university basketball administrator Andrea Constant in 2004. Around 60 other women have joined labeling Cosby as a sexual predator. His case became one of the symbols of the Me Too movement. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.